All right. So we're here with Joe, who plays Nick on the LA Complex. And one of the things that I have gotten a lot of comments on when I review the show, tell me how you feel about Nick's talent as a comedian. Do you feel like he's really getting there, or do you feel like maybe he should be trying his hand at a few other things?
Maybe a little of both. I think that Nick is ultimately a pretty smart and astute guy, and I also think that he is very witty, very funny. Where that talent should be placed, I don't know. I think once in a while it works in stand-up comedy, and sometimes it doesn't. In the second season we start looking at him trying his hand at writing, which we'll see how that sort of pans out. So I think it's about him finding his passion for something. I think if he found a real passion for stand-up, then he could make a go of it. He would put in the time, and yeah, I think he would be great at it. But I think he's not just trying to find his voice as a stand-up. I think he's just trying to find his voice, whether that's in stand-up or whether it's in writing or something else. I'm not really sure yet. I think that's sort of the fun part of following someone like that. If it was just following a stand-up comic, it would be a reality show.
Right.
This is a character who has many facets and ups and downs and ins and outs, and so hopefully you'll either root for him to be a stand-up or to try something else.
But I mean, as bad as he bombs when he's on stage, he has a lot of really funny moments just in his regular life.
Well, exactly.
So can you talk about maybe some of your favorite, like getting to play the comedy moments, either for you doing the jokes on stage or when?
Well, I mean, I love awkward humor. I mean, the original version of The Office is probably one of my favorite things of all time, and I think that stuff is very real. And certainly watching a stand-up comic bomb, I'm a big stand-up comedy fan, and I've seen a lot of people bomb, and I've done stand-up and bombed myself, and so I love playing that stuff. I love diving headfirst into something really awkward and uncomfortable. And everything I get to do is a lot of fun. I mean, I get to have a lot of awkward sexual encounters.
True.
There's choking, which doesn't go so well. That's a lot of fun, and just the great thing about Nick is that it's like if he stopped talking halfway through what he says, he would have said the right thing and he would have been fine, but he just keeps talking, and if he could just shut himself up halfway through, it would have been, but he says too much all the time, so he gets himself into a lot of these problems, and that's always fun to try and find the train of thought into those things, and realistically how you get into and then out of those problems. So.
Right. And I mean, one of the ways that I think he does that in the first season or the first 6, when he ultimately steals the girl's story and uses it on stage,
comes up with her together. That's a very funny.
But that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, like, is that a turning point for him? Are there going to be big repercussions?
Yeah.
In his world?
I mean, most of the second season deals with what happens after that stand-up bit. And what's great is, I mean, we had Georgina, who plays Sabrina, we had this argument, and then they ended up putting some of the stuff into the show in the second season where I never thought of it as stealing. I mean, when I read it, I understood that he took some of that stuff, but he didn't know it was part of her stand-up, and he thought they were riffing in bed, and he came up with some of that stuff as well. So I think it's kind of an interesting place to find him. He gets sort of pitted against Sabrina in the second season and has to sort of apologize or come to terms with the fact that happened, but I think he holds pretty strong with the fact that he didn't knowingly steal it, that he genuinely thought they came up with something together, and kind of liked that they came up with something together. That was, I think, kind of exciting to him, that he met someone that brought the funny out of him, that brought his, and so I think it was kind of, for him, it was really upsetting to find out that she thought he just stole those bits.
Right.
So yeah, there's definitely repercussions. He's definitely made to pay for that.
Well, I mean, because it sounds like, and it was the start of a people's court case. I mean, they actually did one where a girl sued an ex-boyfriend for stealing her jokes.
Really?
So, is this something that they can work together in the future? Like, can they move past this?
I think, yeah. I mean, I think that's the sort of the trajectory of the next season, is them trying to figure out a way to get past it. Okay. And it's also, Nick gets taken to task for all this stuff and has to sort of man up and fight back a little bit, which is what's sort of exciting to me about that this season is that Sabrina sort of lights a fire under him, and eventually he has to sort of throw the stone back at her, And that's sort of an exciting prospect for him, not to be the sort of the nice guy all of a sudden, but to have to go to war and find the fun in the edgier, darker side of life.
Right.
You know.
Well, because so much of the show is dealing with that. Like, you're not glamorizing this process at all.
No.
Are there any moments that you could point to, either in the end of the first 6 or in season 2, what you've shot so far, where something goes right for Nick professionally, where it finally seems like he's getting that moment?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. I mean, they certainly. I mean, even though there's the contentious idea that he stole the jokes, him actually getting up and having some confidence and doing the stand up that way, and also ending up with Abby. I mean, personally, he is able to sort of turn that around. And yeah, there's some stuff in the second season. There's, like I said, he's sort of asked in so many ways to stand up for himself and to man up by Sabrina, and he does. You know, he really he meets her head on. Her edgy and dry way of doing things. He can't just be the nice guy with her.
Right.
He has to sort of meet her halfway, and he does. And it's that's what's sort of interesting to me, is to watch him go, okay. You know, you want to play with the bull, you'll get the horns, that kind of thing.
Right. Are there any situations that you've been involved in on the show that you feel like, oh my God, that's happened to me in my actual life, trying to make it in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I tried stand-up right before we started last year, so I certainly had an understanding of the, you know, getting up there with not nearly enough experience and just trying to make people laugh and trying to connect to your own voice up there, which takes years and years. These guys are professionals. And certainly personally, you know, having someone assume that you're their best friend when you're in love with them is well, not far from reality.
And talking about that, I mean, Abby moved in with him pretty fast.
Yeah.
He said maybe sometimes too much. She said sometimes too many things. They never quite were on the same page. But do you feel like that they're a really good match for each other, and that there should be a back and forth between them going forward?
I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see how it develops, because I think that what happened with them happened very quickly, and I think there's definitely a connection there. But I think both of them idealize the other one in different ways. I think he thinks of her as this sort of quirky, exciting, you know, wonderful antithesis to him, an answer to all his problems, and to her he's this, you know, ultimate nice guy, always there for her, the answer to all her problems. Now, whether that can develop into an actual relationship, you know, we'll see on the show. And I think that's what's interesting about Sabrina, is that that's actually in a lot of ways more of a real relationship, because she's a comic and she calls him on his bullshit, you know, and she makes him be a man instead of this sort of like, you know, this idea of a nice guy. And so in a lot of ways it's a little more realistic. But I think that, you know, with Abby there's definitely a connection, and whether you can translate that into a real relationship or not, you know, time and episodes will tell, I guess.
And I mean, I would imagine too, Connor is always, at least so far, he's kind of the quote unquote obstacle in Nick's way for Abby.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, Connor's sort of it's interesting, because Connor's attentions are always so, I mean, he's sort of just grabbing at anyone just to stay. And I think that because that sort of fizzles with Connor and Abby pretty quickly in the beginning of the first season, and we don't deal with it with Nick, but I think he probably knows and has probably had a conversation with her where she's like, you know, this happened and I caught having sex with this other girl, and I think he probably was able to go, I don't think this is going to be much of a problem, at least for the foreseeable future. So I don't think it's like a major, and Nick and Connor are friends, right? I mean, they're very good friends, so I think it was probably a bit of a nuisance. I'm sure it's also not the first time that Nick and Connor have gone to a party and Nick's been like, in like 5 years I'm going to tell that girl I like her, and Connor's like, yeah, I slept with her in the bathroom just 10 minutes ago, you know? So I'm sure it's not the end of the world.
Okay. So if you could point to one thing in the episodes that you're shooting right now that you think the fans are really going to love, that because you really loved shooting it, what would that be?
I think that we get to see Paul F. Tompkins again.
Oh, cool.
Which is great. I get to, I don't know how much I can reveal, but I get to, basically, Sabrina and I get put in a writer's room for a late night talk show that Paul F. Tompkins is doing. So our first day, we got to do all this stuff that Paul Tompkins is going to do in the first 3 episodes, and so it was. To me, it's such a joy to have him around, and I think people really responded to him and Marilyn Rice Gubb's stuff in the first episode, and so I always love playing. He's, to me, is like I can't keep a straight face around him. He's just one of the funniest people in the world, and he's great on the show, and he's so vicious, and it's such a good meter of what the show is like, how it doesn't pull its punches, and how funny and dark and edgy it can be, and so I think they're gonna love to see him again. He goes even further.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, as long as Nick doesn't steal my job and become a blogger, I think we'll be okay.
Blogger, that's a good one for him. Now, I'm stealing ideas as me
It's fine.
for him. Yeah, it's
awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Cheers.